Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Grant and I'm the host of Remington Graphics, and today I'm going to be showing you guys a really awesome tool for Blender called Blend4Web. Now Blend4Web is a tool that allows you to put your Blender 3D model and textures into an actual web browser so you can view it online. It exports straight to HTML and JSON files, so it's really useful and it has a lot of potential and a lot of cool things it can do. And I'm sure some of you will be able to find a really awesome use for it. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. So if you guys are interested in checking out Blend4Web, there is a free version available on their website and it's full of features. It doesn't feel restricted at all, which is one of my favorite things about what they did with this. So you can get it from blend4web.com. We come over to the downloads tab here and you can see we have Blend4Web CE, which is the free version that I'll be using in this video. We have Blend4Web Pro, which has some extra features, especially with licensing. And then we also have Blend4Web Pro LTS, which has a bunch of extra features. You can read more about it, but for now we'll just be using Blend4Web CE. So you guys can go ahead and click the download button. It is a rather large file. It's 1.4 gigabytes. Fortunately, I already have it downloaded, so I'm not going to waste your time making you watch me download a 1.4 gigabyte file. So go ahead and download that, pause the video until it's done, and once you get it all downloaded, it should be in a .zip format, which is what I've got right here. So if I open this up, we can see that we have a folder in here called Blend4Web CE or _CE. And what we can do with this is, or what we want to do with this, is extract it to a memorable location. I already have it extracted as well because extracting it takes it a while, so I extract it to my Blender Assets folder, which is where I keep all my Blender stuff. So you can see I got my material library, all that. Just make sure it's somewhere memorable where it isn't going to get deleted, because if you do delete it, then you've got some bad issues on your hands. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up Blender now, and we're gonna go ahead and enable this add-on slash plugin slash entire engine for for Blender. It's really awesome. So it is a little bit different from the rest of the add-ons that you typically enable. So what we're going to do is we're going to come into the user preferences. We're coming over to the file selection here, and we're going to change this scripts input here. If there is something here other than // it means you changed it in the past. You probably know what it's from, but it should be // by default. So we're going to go ahead and click open folder, and we're going to navigate to wherever we saved that. And mine's in my Blender assets, as I mentioned earlier. And you can see I have Blend4Web and then Blend4Web CE. Now you should open the Blend4Web CE folder and you should see all these folders. You don't need to click anything, just click accept once you're in there. And you can see that our directory is now in here. Next, what we need to do is click Save User Settings and go ahead and restart Blender. So I'm gonna click X over here and open up Blender again. And by closing and reopening Blender, it initializes the Blend4Web add-on in Blender because there's so much to add to it. So now if we come back into the user preferences, go to add-ons, we now have a little tab down here that says Blend4Web, and we can enable it. It is going to take a little bit to turn on because it's got so much stuff it's adding to Blender, but it shouldn't take too long, and you can see there we go. So now if you'd like to make sure Blend4Web is in Blender every time you start it up, you can click Save User Settings, or if you'd just rather use it for one time, you don't have to click this. I'm gonna click it because I love Blend4Web. It's really cool. It's got just a list of really awesome features. So now we can change this from cycles or whatever's up here to Blend4Web because that's its own engine. Now by default, our scene isn't very extravagant, and if we click Fast Preview down here, it will open up our web browser so we can actually see what our Blend4Web scene looks like in our web browser. So if I click Fast Preview here, you can see it opens up, and we have our cube. And it's not much, and it kind of looks like crap because that's what the default Blender scene is. It's pretty crappy. But we can create some really awesome, almost photorealistic, or not photorealistic, PBR materials, things that look really nice. They're of course not actual PBR because they don't use ray tracing in this engine, but it does look pretty realistic, and it's got actually, it's impressive to say, it's actually very similar to the results I got from Eevee. So that's saying a lot about these guys that developed this. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and close out of our preview window, and I'm actually going to go ahead and delete everything in our scene because we don't need any of it. Next, I'm gonna go ahead and add a UV sphere, and I'm just gonna add some extra segments to make it a little bit more smooth, I suppose. And we're gonna change smooth shading, or change it to smooth shading. Next, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to move it up just a little bit by pressing G, Z, and then 1. Let me really quick turn on my screencast key. So that was just G, Z, and then 1 to move it up 1 unit. And I'm also going to go ahead and add a plane. And we're gonna go ahead and scale this up 5 times. That looks good. All right, so now let's go ahead and create a material. I actually have a few texture maps that I got from polygon.com. I have a color map, a normal map, and an ambient occlusion map. And these 3 maps will work flawlessly with Blend4Web. There are some other maps, but it's kind of hard to use. If you do have a specular map, I definitely recommend using that. But for now, these are the only three that we're really gonna look at. So I'm gonna go ahead and select our sphere here, and we're gonna go ahead and put the material on the sphere. So I'm gonna come into the material settings here, click new, and I'm gonna call this stone because it is a stone texture. And I'm gonna come into the textures tab. I'm gonna click new, and we're gonna import our color map. So before we get too far into this, I'm gonna switch over to material mode in the viewport. Oh, I forgot, we should probably set up a light as well. So I'm just gonna set up a basic, not a spotlight, a sunlight, just so we can get some decent shading on our object, just like that. All right, perfect. So now I'm gonna go ahead and open up our image from my desktop here. So Blend4Web, color. And you can see that it doesn't have anything on it, and that's because our UV sphere isn't unwrapped. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch over to edit mode, press U, and then we'll do a sphere projection, just because we're working with a sphere. And we're gonna have a little bit of distortion up at the poles, but overall it looks pretty good. And it is a kind of low resolution texture, so I'm gonna go ahead and change the size up, not 6 to like 3 maybe. There we go, that looks good. So now we have a texture on our sphere, but it doesn't really look that extravagant at all. So let's go ahead and add a normal map. So we'll come up here to our texture options, add a new texture, we'll call this one normal. And immediately I'm gonna come down to the bottom here and open up our normal map, just like that. And you can see all of a sudden our sphere is trippy. That's the only thing I can really describe it. One thing we want to make sure we do is match the size of the other one. So I'm going to change these all to 3. And under the image sampling tab right here, we're going to change, we're going to come over here and we're going to check normal map. And that will tell Blend4Web's engine to use the normal map information instead of just the color information. And we can uncheck use alpha as well. It's not necessary, but I like to do that just in case there is some alpha in the normal map. For whatever reason, I've had it happen before. Anyway, under the influence tab next, this basically affects where the what's being changed about the model. So you can see we have different things here. We have like diffuse, shading, specular, and geometry. So I'm gonna go ahead and uncheck color because we don't want it to affect the color. And instead, under the geometry tab, I'm gonna select normal. And you can see immediately our map is here. And it's a little bit glossy and a little bit reflective, but we can change this all in a little. So let's go ahead and add our ambient occlusion map as well. So we'll call this AO. And I'm gonna do the same thing as I did before. Just go ahead and open up the map right away, AO. And you can see our sphere is now white, but instead of changing it from diffuse to shading or to specular or something like that, instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and change the blend mode to multiply. And that'll go ahead and basically multiply the brightness values of the ambient occlusion map against the color map, so those dark spots get darker. So you can see if I drag the color influence right here, no ambient occlusion with ambient occlusion. And I just think it adds a little bit of extra pizzazz and a little bit of extra depth. I'm actually gonna change to like 0.8. And then I'm also gonna come up to the normal map, and the normal map is a bit strong for my taste right now, so I'm gonna change to 0.75, just so we get something that's nice and in the middle. Now we can come back to our settings, our material settings here. We can change some other things such as the specular intensity or the diffuse settings and stuff like that, diffuse intensity. And I think it looks good as it is right now. So now if we go into our fast preview again, it'll load up here and we can see that we have our beautiful, beautiful sphere. And it looks pretty dang realistic. And if we used higher resolution textures and stuff or a more realistic model, it would look a lot better as well. Now, one thing that really throws this entire image off is this very, very dark side because of our lighting setup right now, and the fact that there are no shadows being cast. So let's go ahead and fix this. I'm gonna take this sun lamp, I'm just gonna make it a little bit more dramatic angle, I suppose, so it casts a longer shadow. And in order to enable shadows, what we need to do is we need to select our object, go to the object settings, and down at the bottom we should have an option that says shadows. And we're gonna check both cast and receive shadows because we want our sphere here to both cast and receive. And then we're gonna do the same for the sphere, or the plane down at the bottom. But it doesn't really need to cast shadows because it doesn't have anything to cast shadows onto. So we'll just set it to receive shadows. Now if we come into fast preview, we can see that our shadow is being cast. But again, it is very dark, and this side is very dark as well. So let's go ahead and lighten that up, I suppose. Now what you could do is you could do a full-on lighting setup, but what I prefer to do is use environment lighting, which is actually supported in here. You don't really get that the HDRI lighting that you get in Cycles and Eevee, but you do get procedural skies down here. You can see you can do that, or you can just set up a sky with Blender's default settings, which I prefer to do because it's nice and easy. and it looks good. So if we enable these two, it'll start showing the sky in the background here. But we also want it to provide lighting, so we'll check environment lighting, and now you can see it is providing lighting to our scene. So I'm going to change the strength down to 0.3 because I still want to maintain those shadows on the other end. I just don't want them to be as vibrant. And in addition to this, because the sky is a little bit blue, I'm going to also change the sun's color to be a little bit warm. Typically I'd use something like a black body here, but I don't think internal supports that, unfortunately. But it should work. So now if we go into fast preview, it should look a little bit more realistic than what we had before. So there we go, compared to this. So we're already starting to get somewhere and starting to get some realistic results, which is absolutely fantastic. And it was really easy. So now let's go ahead and look at some of the different effects that we can apply to this and get some really cool options. So if we come into the render settings or render tab of the properties menu over here, we get just a list of different things we can do. We can play with the shadows, we can play with reflections and refractions, object outlining, stuff like that. I'm gonna focus on bloom, motion blur, and I guess color correction. We'll do those three. But also remember that ambient occlusion and God rays exist. Just remember they exist. That's all I ask of you right now. So if we go ahead and go into fast preview here, you can see that, wow, our scene is very bright. And that's because of the bloom we applied, obviously. So if we come into the bloom settings here over on this right panel, which is really handy, we can change the intensity of the bloom, for example. So if I want it to only be like half of that, we can change the edge luminance so that it only glows in certain areas or something like that. I'm gonna change it up to like, I don't even know. Like right there, looks nice. But you can get like really cool looking results just playing around with bloom. And it also kind of acts as a sort of Fresnel effect, if you can see that right there from cycles and stuff. So there we go, we can do that. And then we can also change that color correction like I changed in there. And we can also play with motion blur. Unfortunately, motion blur doesn't look the greatest in real time, as you can see here. But it is good that they added this in because I'm sure somebody will find a use for it. I just really can't find one right off the bat. But there we go. But remember how I said the whole God rays and what was the other one? I can't remember what the other one is. Ambient occlusion. See, I told you to remember and I can't even remember myself. We can't edit these, and that's because we don't have it enabled over here in our Blender window. And that's just the way they built it. I think it's right that they built it like that though, because it kind of just reminds you of what you have enabled and what you don't have enabled. Because if all of a sudden you're playing with God rays settings, then you know, it kind of makes no sense when it's not enabled. One thing that is important to remember though is after we exit out of this web player, these settings will not be saved. It'll default back to the settings that are in here. So we need to change these to match that. So in this case, it's 0.44 and 1.17. So 0.44 and 1.17, just like that. And now when we start it up, it'll have these settings by default instead of defaulting back to the default, 1, 4, and 1. So with that being said, there's a lot of different settings to mess around with here, as you can see, and I'm gonna go over a few more here really quick. You can add mist into your scene by coming to the world menu and selecting mist, and you can actually preview this in the material menu, which is nice. And then one of my favorite things about this is you can actually create oceans and stuff like that. So if I were to click new here and come down to the very bottom, if I were to create a new material and come down to the very bottom, we can check this little option that says water. And it's a special water material, and it basically turns this entire plane into an ocean. So I'm gonna just turn off shore smoothing because we don't have a shore. But you can also change things here like waves. You can see it's just got all sorts of settings. I'm gonna leave caustics off. But you can see we have shallow water, shore water, underwater fog, subsurface scattering, ripples, width, waves, all sorts of different things that you can play with. Like there is a lot here. But as you can see over here, it doesn't really change much. But if we come into the fast preview, you can see that we now have a giant ocean. And it is a little bit wonky looking, but you can see if we look at it from underwater, it actually changes the color for above water. I don't know why it's this white color. I had it working before. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's white. I didn't have that happening before. But you can see that it does have some really awesome abilities to replicate that ocean and get it in a real-time rendering engine. It's kind of cool. And you can also change things like the subdivisions of the plane and stuff. So you can see the subdivisions is at 64 right now. You can just toy with it so much. There's so much you can do with this. It's rather insane. And now we're gonna go ahead and take a look at probably my favorite feature of this whole thing, and that's the fact that you can create interactive content, and you can also play with physics in this online, which is absolutely awesome. I actually used this like in my physics class. My teacher used an example, and I didn't realize it was Blend4Web, but it was Blend4Web that somebody was using, and they used it as a physics demonstration, which was really cool to see. So let's go ahead and actually I just keep saying go ahead. Let's go ahead and add some physics to this object. So I'm gonna come into the physics tab, and I'm gonna check object physics, which enables the physics for the object, and then we're gonna go ahead and under the physics type thing, we're going to select rigid body. And that will add this as a rigid body object, which means it moves around and it doesn't squish or anything. Next, we're gonna go ahead and check collision bounds and change it to a sphere. That way it has spherical collision bounds. And we're going to do the same thing with this for the most part. Really, actually, no, not at all. We just need to check object physics. Now, typically in Blender physics, you'd be able to click play and the sphere would fall, but I wonder if actually, yeah, P doesn't work. But anyway, we have to actually preview this in the preview window. But now, so you can see if we open it up, oh, I forgot we still had the ocean going. Let me get rid of the ocean material here. Let's just select this, delete that. All right, now let's try this. So hopefully it doesn't just fall onto the ocean. There we go. So you can see it falls onto the plane and it sits there, which is cool and all. And you can also have it roll down things. So if I were to angle the plane this way like that and then preview it, you can see that it now rolls down it, which is neat. And you can create things like domino courses and stuff like that. I saw it, I was looking through tutorials so I can get an idea of what this is myself. Oops. I keep pressing SY0 instead of RY. We'll just do this. There we go. I could have pressed Alt R. What am I doing? But I was looking through tutorials and some guy made a domino course. And one of the coolest things out of this entire situation is the fact that you can create interactive content with it. So if I were to add a cube right here, and this is gonna be kind of like a ramp, I guess. So move this over here, change the size on the Z axis down, size on the X axis up, move it to here and rotate it, move the ball all the way to the end and move it up a little bit. And then we're gonna go ahead and add another cube, SZ down a lot, SY, and what this is gonna act as is sort of a blockade. So the ball won't be able to roll by. What did I do here? I changed the rotation, real funky. There we go. So we'll put this like here, and then we'll go ahead and enable physics for both of these. They just need to be static objects. We don't need to mess with the collision bounds at all. I am going to change this to a greenish color though, because we want it to stand out, just like that. And now if we go ahead and run this, it should land on it and then just casually stop. Perfect. Looks like our material got a little bit messed up there, but that's fine. We don't need perfect materials for this. So, now let's go ahead and add some interactiveness to it. And basically what we're gonna do here is we're gonna make it so if we click this green thing, and you can see it's lighting up right now, if we click this green thing, the ball will continue rolling, it'll move up or something, and creating a gate, and the ball will roll down, which is the end goal. So one important thing to keep in mind while working with these things is that if you're working with some sort of material or something, or some sort of object that has physics applied to it, you want to apply its location, otherwise it might have some errors when you actually export it. So to apply the location, you're just gonna press Control A and select location. I'm gonna do this for all of these here. And now if we play it again, oops, fast preview. We shouldn't notice much of a difference, but, oh, okay, maybe we shouldn't apply the location of the ball. We'll leave the location of the ball where it is, see if that helps. There we go. So don't apply the location of a rigid body object, just static objects. And any objects that should be actuating or something like that. So now I'm gonna go ahead and split this view here by clicking these three little white lines and dragging. I'm going to open up a node editor window, and I'm going to come over to this node tree thing, which is our Blend4Web logic editor. And it is based off of nodes, which is really cool, especially because a lot of people are familiar with nodes from Cycles. And to enable our logic scenario, we come into the scene tab here and we check this logic editor button, and then we're going to click plus to add a new node tree that we can use over here. And we can go ahead and open it up from our browsing thingy right there, and you can see we get this node here that says entry point. And what entry point is it's basically from the time that the web page is loaded, fully loaded, from when the engine, I guess, is fully loaded. That's when entry point is running. So we can create different steps almost. So we have different sensors, and then we have different results or actuations that we can perform based off of certain actions done in the browser. So in this case, we have switch select, which is my favorite because it allows you to click on things. So in the case that I click on this green thing, then it will do something. So I'm going to connect next to previous because that's kind of how it works. The next thing goes to the previous thing, obviously, or whatever. It's just showing what connects here. I'm actually going to rename this green blob we have here, this green block, to trigger, just to keep track of it. So we can add our trigger object into the object tab. So that's saying if it is clicked, and we have two options here. We have trigger hit and miss. So in the case that the trigger is clicked, then do this. In the case that the trigger is missed, then do this. So we don't really want to worry about whether or not it misses. We just want to have it do something when it is clicked. So I'm going to change this to transform object because we want to move our little blob here, or block. I don't know why I keep calling it a blob. It's obviously a block. But anyway, so in the case that it's hit, we connect it to previous here. We want the trigger to move up. So we select our object as trigger. We're going to change the space to local because we want it to change in relevance to itself, not in relevance to its environment. And we're going to change its Z location by 5. Oops, I should leave that. Oh God, 0. There you go. We'll change that to 5. That way it goes up 5 Blender units. And then we can also change the duration in here. So it takes 5 seconds for it to move, or 1 second. 1 second sounds good. And we don't need to put anything past here. If you'd like to expand on this tree, you can do all sorts of things. There's all sorts of different control flow things. So you can see you can delay things. We can create variables and use the jump. So if ball location equals 5, then this, or if ball location is greater than 10, do this, or something like that. And you also have JavaScript stuff, which I don't understand, but you know, it exists, so that's cool. But this adds a lot of, that node adds a lot of stuff, a lot of features, and a lot of potential for developers. So let's go ahead and fast preview this. Let's see our scene loads here, and you can see our ball gets stuck, and what happens if we click our green thing? Oops, that moved in the wrong direction. I guess I forgot that I have to apply the rotation too. That would be kind of important. I forgot completely that I rotated that. And that's important, otherwise this stuff will get stuck. And I don't know why that just teleported through. I'm actually gonna recreate this because I don't want it to do that again. Sometimes it does get a little bit buggy, I've noticed. I'm pretty sure that's user error. I'm sure I did something wrong in there that somebody will point out. And then we're gonna go ahead and apply the location. We don't have to apply rotation because I didn't rotate it this time. Now let's go ahead and fast preview it again. Oh, I didn't add object physics, did I? Nope, I did not. Let me do that really quick. Object physics, static, cool. Now let's try this. Fast preview. There we go, click it, moves up, and the ball continues rolling. Perfect. It worked flawlessly, and now our ball is gonna fall into oblivion, which is nice. But there's just so much stuff you can do with this, and I absolutely love this. So let's go ahead and actually export our object now. So we can export to two different things. We can export it to HTML, which is what I prefer because I actually know how to use HTML a little bit. Or we can export it to .json. So I'm going to export to HTML in my case, and we'll call this Blend4Web demo. And now, if we go ahead and open up, well, I guess it exported. Where did it export to? Oop, I was exporting it to my documents instead of my desktop. So let's do that right now. And now you can see we have Blend4Web demo.html. And if we go ahead and open this up, you can see it loads the engine. And just like that, we have our scene done. Now, one thing to note is that physics isn't supported in HTML, but as you just saw there, you can click things. So just keep that in mind. You do have to export to a JSON file if you want to use physics, which is unfortunate, but HTML does have its limitations. So anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope you guys took some interest in Blend4Web. It's a really awesome tool, and it has a lot of different things you can do with it, whether it's educational or showing off a product or just playing around with it. There's a whole lot you can do. But that about sums it up for this video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Adios.